If the sun somehow moved just 1 mile closer to Earth, would we even notice? And what would happen to life on our planet? We all start with the obvious. 1 mile sounds like nothing when you re-talking about something. 93 million miles away. That S like moving a fraction of a hair S width closer to a bonfire that S already across a football field. But the sun isn't just any bonfire, and even tiny changes in our cosmic neighborhood can have surprising consequences. The first thing to understand is that Earth's distance from the sun isn't constant anyway. Due to our elliptical orbit, we're actually 3 million miles closer to the sun in January than we are in July. So a 1 mile shift would be completely undetectable in terms of raw distance. You couldn't measure it with any instrument we have. The change in solar radiation would be roughly 0.02%. To put that in perspective, the sun's brightness naturally varies by about 0.1% over its 11-year solar cycle, which is 50,000 times more than our 1 mile shift would cause. But here's where things get interesting. The real question isn't about the distance itself, but about how that distance changed. If the sun suddenly teleported 1 mile closer, we'd have bigger problems than temperature. The sun's gravity would instantly be affecting Earth from a slightly different position, which doesn't sound like much until you consider that every object in the solar system is locked in an incredibly delicate gravitational dance. The moon's orbit around Earth would shift slightly, while the timing of the tides would change by fractions of seconds. GPS satellites, which rely on extraordinarily precise calculations of gravitational effects, would start giving incorrect readings. These changes would cascade through our technology. Financial markets, which rely on microsecond precision timing synchronized by GPS, would experience glitches. Aircraft navigation systems would need recalibration. Power grid, which uses GPS for synchronization across vast distances, might experience fluctuations. Scientists studying gravitational waves would detect the shift as a massive anomaly, probably thinking their instruments had malfunctioned. Astronomers would notice immediately that something was wrong when stellar positions didn't match their calculations, even if they couldn't immediately identify the cause. Now, if the sun moved closer gradually, over millions of years, that's a different story entirely. Earth's orbit would slowly adjust to compensate. The planet would speed up imperceptibly in its orbit to maintain equilibrium. The length of a year would decrease by about 11 seconds. About 11 seconds per year, getting shorter and shorter, but just 11 seconds total forever. Future calendars would need to account for years being 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 35 seconds long instead of 46 seconds long. But let us consider the more dramatic scenario. What if Earth itself moved 1 mile closer to the sun while keeping the same orbital velocity? This would be catastrophic, not because of the distance, but because it would throw our orbit out of balance. Earth would enter an unstable elliptical orbit, swinging closer to the sun at some points and farther away at others. Over time, these orbital perturbations would compound. We might collide with Venus's orbital path in a few million years, or get ejected into a wider orbit that would freeze the planet. The biological effects of a simple 1 mile change would be essentially zero. Humans wouldn't feel any temperature difference. Plants wouldn't grow differently. Seasons wouldn't change. But the psychological effect would be profound. The knowledge that our cosmic position had shifted, that the fundamental constants we'd taken for granted had changed, would reshape how we think about our place in the universe. Religious and philosophical debates would erupt about what caused the shift. Scientists would scramble to update every model and calculation that assumed the Earth-Sun distance as a constant. What's really fascinating is that if we wanted to deliberately move Earth 1 mile closer to the sun, we could theoretically do it. We'd need to slow Earth's orbital velocity by about 0.002 meters per second. This could be accomplished by strategically detonating every nuclear weapon on Earth at precisely calculated points. Though the environmental devastation would far outweigh any effect of the orbital change, alternatively, we could use a gravity tractor, positioning massive asteroids near Earth to gradually pull it into a new orbit over thousands of years. In the end, though, the most likely outcome of the sun moving 1 mile closer would be surprisingly mundane. After the initial panic and recalibration of our instruments, life would go on exactly as before. Children would still complain about homework, coffee would still taste better in the morning, and summers would still feel too short. The 1 mile difference would become a quirky fact that science teachers would mention right before explaining that it literally doesn't matter at all. unless of course it was the first mile of many. If the sun kept moving closer, mile by mile, year by year, then we'd have a countdown timer on human civilization. At the current Earth-Sun distance, moving closer by about 6 million miles would push Earth's average temperature above the boiling point of water. That gives us 6 million years if the sun moved 1 mile closer per year. But that's a different question entirely, and probably one that Marcus wasn't asking. And thus we arrive at our answer. If the sun moved just 1 mile closer, the physical effects would be negligible. The technological disruptions would be temporary. But the proof that such cosmic shifts were possible would fundamentally change how humanity views its future in the universe.